I know for 100% they won't find anything. Well, I'm actually pretty happy about that because it's been about 3 months. I've been asking for them, and it's just been delayed.
When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police bring dogs into a missing persons search, the world pays attention. These aren't just pets on leashes. They are highly trained investigators with senses sharper than any human could ever imagine. But here's the twist. Not all police dogs are the same. Some are trackers, sniffing out the living. Others are cadaver dogs, trained to detect death itself. In the haunting case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the distinction matters more than ever. Because while RCMP officers deployed specialized dogs, the children's stepfather, Daniel Martell, boldly declared that 100% they will find nothing. His words raised chilling questions. Was he simply confident, or did he know something that the rest of us don't? Tonight we dive into the difference between K9 dogs and cadaver dogs, why RCMP used them in stages, and why Daniel's statement has fueled suspicion across Nova Scotia and beyond. When most people hear the phrase K9 unit, they think of a snarling German shepherd lunging at a suspect or a dog sniffing luggage at the airport. The truth, however, is far more complex. The world of K9 policing is vast, layered, and incredibly specialized. To understand why cadaver dogs matter so much in cases like Lilly and Jack Sullivan, we first need to step back and look at what K9 really means. The term itself comes from a simple play on words. K9 sounds like canine, the scientific term for dogs. Over time, it became the universal shorthand for any dog trained to serve in law enforcement. But not all K9s are created equal. Within police departments, there are divisions, subdivisions, and specialties that require years of training and precision. A narcotics detection dog, for example, is not the same as a patrol dog. A search and rescue bloodhound is not the same as a dog trained to detect firearms residue. Each discipline requires unique training, unique reinforcement, and even unique handling by the officers who work with them. The first thing to understand is that K9 dogs are not chosen randomly. Police don't simply walk into a shelter and grab the friendliest pup. These dogs are bred and selected for their drive, intelligence, and resilience. German Shepherds and Belgian Malinois are by far the most common breeds, and for good reason. They are athletic, loyal, and able to switch seamlessly between play and work. Their instincts, honed over generations, make them ideal partners in high-stress situations. Other breeds, like bloodhounds or Labrador retrievers, also make appearances, especially in scent-tracking roles, where their legendary noses can follow trails that vanished hours earlier. Once chosen, a dog's life transforms into rigorous training. From the age of 1 or 2, they are conditioned through repetitive drills, positive reinforcement, and real-world simulations. A K9 patrol dog, for instance, might learn to bite and hold a suspect until commanded to release. But it isn't about aggression. It's about control. These dogs must be steady enough to walk calmly in a crowd one moment and fearless enough to confront a violent offender the next. For narcotics detection, training revolves around scent libraries. Handlers hide tiny samples of substances in boxes, luggage, even vehicles, and reward the dog each time it alerts correctly. Over months, the dog learns to ignore distractions and lock onto the target odor with near-surgical precision. Tracking dogs, the type most relevant at the beginning of a missing person investigation, undergo yet another path of training. Here, the dog is taught to follow the scent cone left behind by human activity. Each of us constantly sheds microscopic skin cells, oils, and organic particles that drift into the air and settle onto surfaces. A trained K9 can follow this invisible trail for miles, even across rivers, even after rain. Some dogs can separate multiple overlapping scent trails, picking out the freshest one with astonishing accuracy. In the crucial hours after a disappearance, these trackers are the family's best chance at finding a lost loved one alive. And it's not just about scent. K9 handlers often describe their partners as reading the environment in ways humans cannot. A dog will pause at a broken branch, sniff deeply, and pull in a direction no one thought to check. They can sense when a trail ages out, when the scent molecules scatter too far apart to follow. Handlers learn to watch subtle cues, a shift in the tail, a sudden pause, a tightening of muscles. These are not just dogs on leashes. They are investigative tools, biological machines fine-tuned for a mission. But the K9 bond goes deeper still. Unlike technology, these dogs form emotional connections with their handlers. They ride in the same patrol car, live in the same home, and often retire as part of the officer's family. That trust is crucial in the field. A dog must know that when it charges into the dark woods at midnight, its handler will be there. And the handler must trust that the dog's nose is telling the truth, even when human eyes see nothing. Many cases in Canada and beyond have been solved because a dog pulled its handler in a direction that seemed impossible, only to uncover evidence hidden from sight. When RCMP deploy a K9 unit, it signals urgency. It means the situation has escalated beyond ordinary search efforts. Volunteers may comb the woods, officers may knock on doors, but when the dogs arrive, the search enters a new phase. Communities know this. Neighbors stop and watch as the German shepherds leap from their vehicles, harnesses strapped tight, noses already quivering in the air. For families of the missing, the sight is bittersweet. Relief that the best resources are on the case, but fear of what might be found. It's important to emphasize, K9 units, broadly speaking, are about finding life. They are the first line of hope. When a child vanishes in Nova Scotia's dense forests, when an elderly hiker disappears along a trail, when a suspect flees after committing a crime, the K9s are unleashed not to mourn, but to recover, to rescue, to bring someone home alive. That distinction matters because when the police later shift to cadaver dogs, the meaning changes entirely. But before we get there, we must sit with the role K9s play. They are symbols of urgency, yes, but also of optimism. Imagine for a moment the night Lilly and Jack Sullivan were reported missing. It was early May in Nova Scotia, the air still cool, the woods thick and unforgiving. Officers knew every hour mattered. They called in K9 units, hoping to catch a scent, a trail, any sign that the children had wandered and could still be found. Those dogs trotted into the darkness, harnesses clipped, handlers whispering commands. Every nose-to-the-ground movement carried the weight of 2 young lives. In that moment, the K9s were not simply police tools. They were the last thread of hope. And yet, as we now know, the K9 searches turned up little. No children, no conclusive trail, only fragments, footprints in the mud, a sock in the woods, echoes of a story that didn't fit. The community waited, breath held, as questions multiplied. Why had the K9s not found more? Were the children truly there to be found? Or had something darker already happened before the search began? These questions lead directly to the next layer, the cadaver dogs. Because once regular K9s fail, and once days stretch into weeks, police begin to consider the unthinkable. And that is where the story turns grim. But to understand that shift, and why Daniel Martell's words cut so sharply, we first have to appreciate what the initial K9 search represented. It was hope. It was urgency. It was the system trying to believe that Lilly and Jack could still be alive. If K9 dogs represent hope, cadaver dogs represent the hardest truth a family can face. Their very presence at a search site signals a shift in tone, from "we might still find them alive" to "we need to prepare for the worst." To the untrained ear, the difference may seem subtle. After all, they are all dogs, aren't they? But to investigators, cadaver dogs are a category all their own, with skills so specialized and so precise that even seasoned detectives speak of them with awe. A cadaver dog, sometimes called a human, remains detection dog, is trained for one purpose: to locate death. Unlike search and rescue dogs who follow fresh human scent, cadaver dogs are conditioned to recognize the chemical cocktail released during decomposition. Human bodies, whether freshly deceased, weeks old, or skeletal remains decades later, all emit volatile organic compounds as cells break down. Scientists estimate there are over 400 distinct chemical markers of human decomposition, and a cadaver dog's nose can recognize them in concentrations as faint as a single part per trillion. To put that into perspective, it's like detecting one drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. The training process is intense and deliberate. Dogs are introduced to materials that mimic human decomposition, samples from donated cadaver research facilities, synthetic compounds designed to replicate the scent, even teeth or bones obtained legally for training. Each time the dog locates the target scent, it is rewarded, usually with playtime or a favorite toy. Over time, the dog learns that the smell of death equals success. Unlike narcotics or explosives dogs, cadaver dogs are trained not just for accuracy, but for subtlety. Their alerts must be calm and clear, a sit, a paw, or a quiet focus, because in many cases, they may be working near grieving families or sensitive crime scenes where a loud reaction would be inappropriate. What makes these dogs extraordinary is their ability to detect remains under conditions humans would never consider. They can pick up traces buried 6 feet underground. They can alert on human tissue sealed inside containers. They can identify remains hidden in burned-out buildings or floating beneath the surface of a lake. Some are even trained for water searches, riding boats while their noses hover just above the waves, alerting when they catch the faintest whiff of decomposition rising through the currents. Others are cross-trained to work in disaster zones, finding victims of earthquakes or fires where rubble and ash mask every clue. And perhaps most chilling of all, cadaver dogs can detect the residual scent of a body even after it has been moved. Imagine a person killed inside a car, and later their body is dumped elsewhere. The cadaver dog can alert inside the car days later, pointing investigators to the original scene of death. That ability has cracked countless cases worldwide. Courts in North America and Europe have admitted cadaver dog alerts as critical evidence, and many high-profile convictions have leaned heavily on their findings. This specialization makes cadaver dogs a double-edged sword for families. On one hand, their work can bring closure, locating a loved one's body when all else fails. On the other hand, their deployment sends a message no family wants to hear. Authorities are no longer searching to rescue, but to recover. In Nova Scotia, when word spread that RCMP were bringing in cadaver dogs to search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the community's hope dimmed. It was no longer just about finding 2 missing children in the woods. It was about bracing for the possibility that they might never come home alive. The public often underestimates just how precise these animals are. Unlike technology, drones, ground-penetrating radar, even forensic labs, cadaver dogs can act instantly in real time across vast landscapes. Handlers recount moments when their dogs veered off course, noses twitching, and led them straight to a shallow grave that no human eye could detect. One handler in the United States described his dog alerting on a single tooth hidden in leaves. In another Canadian case, dogs located remains scattered after decades of exposure, giving families long-awaited answers. Of course, no tool is perfect. Defense lawyers sometimes challenge cadaver dog alerts in court, questioning handler bias or environmental contamination. But study after study confirms that when properly trained, cadaver dogs boast accuracy rates that rival or surpass forensic instruments. Their noses are, quite literally, among the most sensitive investigative tools on Earth. In the Sullivan case, their arrival carried heavy symbolic weight. The first phase of the search had been about urgency, K9 trackers racing to find signs of life. But after days without results, after clues that went nowhere, RCMP made the call to bring in cadaver dogs. It was a transition everyone in the community felt. Families whispered about what it meant. Neighbors gathered near the woods, watching handlers clip specialized harnesses onto their dogs, their faces etched with gravity. Reporters broadcast live, noting the distinction. These were not the same canines seen before. These were cadaver dogs. For the uninitiated, the change might have seemed minor. For those who understand policing, it was monumental. The RCMP were signaling that they no longer believed they were chasing living children. They were preparing to recover bodies. And that is why Daniel Martell's statement, his insistence that 100% cadaver dogs will find nothing, sent shockwaves. Because to dismiss such a powerful tool outright is either reckless confidence or something more sinister. Before we examine Daniel's words, though, it's crucial to sit with what cadaver dogs represent. They are not villains. They are not omens. They are the last chance for truth when lies and silence cloud everything else. Families may dread their arrival, but without them, many cases would remain forever unsolved. In the darkest hours of tragedy, cadaver dogs give voice to the voiceless, the victims who can no longer speak for themselves. And so, when RCMP unleashed them in Nova Scotia's woods, the story of Lilly and Jack shifted irreversibly. The narrative was no longer one of wandering children, but of possible hidden remains. It was the grim stage where hope collides with reality. And in that moment, every word spoken by Daniel, every ounce of his certainty, began to matter in ways the public couldn't ignore. When a child goes missing, the first hours are everything. Investigators call it the golden window. In that time, a missing child is most likely to be found alive, wandering, hiding, or trapped, but still within reach. Every choice police make during those critical hours is driven by one central principle: assume life until proven otherwise. That principle is the reason the RCMP deployed traditional K9 dogs in the early stages of the Lilly and Jack Sullivan investigation, not cadaver dogs. To the public, this distinction might seem puzzling. After all, dogs are dogs, and their noses are equally sharp. Why not send in every available resource at once? But within policing, timing matters. The first wave of search dogs is about hope. They are trained to detect the scent of the living, sweat, body odor, freshly shed skin cells. They can follow footprints through wet grass, trace a trail across a stream, even lead officers to a hiding child tucked under a fallen log. Their mission is not grim. Their mission is rescue. Using cadaver dogs too soon would send a very different message, both to the family and to the public. It would mean, from the very start, that police were presuming death. For grieving parents, that shift is devastating. Imagine a mother clinging to the belief that her children are lost in the woods. If police arrive on day one with cadaver dogs, that mother will feel they've already given up. For the community, it suggests that hope is misplaced, that tragedy is the only likely outcome. No agency wants to crush hope prematurely. That is why the RCMP began with regular K9S. In those early days, the forests of Nova Scotia were filled with urgency. Officers fanned out, volunteers combed trails, helicopters swept overhead, and on the ground, K9 dogs pulled at their leashes, noses to the earth. Every rustle of leaves, every broken twig carried possibility. For the first 48 hours, it was a rescue mission. Cadaver dogs were not just unnecessary, they would have been inappropriate. But there is another layer to this decision: evidence. Regular K9s not only track the living, they also pick up on articles dropped along the way: clothing, toys, personal items. If Lilly or Jack had walked through those woods, the dogs could have found a trail, a sock, a scrap of fabric carrying their scent. And in fact, some evidence was recovered. Children's boot prints in the mud, a sock, fragments that hinted at presence but stopped short of a full trail. Those fragments deepened the mystery. Why did the dogs not carry the scent further? Why did the trail seem to vanish? For investigators, this created a dilemma. Either the children had indeed passed through those woods, but then been removed, perhaps by vehicle, or they had never been there at all, and the items were staged or misplaced. In both scenarios, cadaver dogs were not yet the answer. At that stage, the priority remained: find the children alive. The transition to cadaver dogs came only later, when days passed and hope began to erode. This timing is crucial to understand because it reflects both investigative strategy and emotional responsibility. RCMP knew that the moment cadaver dogs were introduced, the narrative would change. Media would report it as a search for bodies, not children. Families would hear it as an acknowledgement of death, and the public would feel the weight of finality. Police tread carefully here, balancing duty with compassion. In other words, the RCMP did not delay out of incompetence. They delayed out of hope, to keep the family afloat, to honor the possibility, however slim, that Lilly and Jack could still be found alive. The decision to start with K9 dogs was not only logical, but humane. And yet, this sequence of decisions makes the words of Daniel Martell all the more jarring. Because by the time cadaver dogs entered the picture, the entire province understood what it meant. Reporters broadcast it, locals whispered it, families prayed it wasn't true. Cadaver dogs arriving meant rescue had shifted to recovery. So when Daniel looked into cameras and insisted, 100%, they will find nothing, his certainty rang louder than any search helicopter. It wasn't just a statement, it was a declaration. While RCMP moved cautiously, step by step, Daniel leapt to the conclusion that cadaver dogs would fail. His confidence undermined the careful timeline police had built. It cast a shadow over the investigation. Why was he so sure? Was it denial, a defense mechanism born of stress? Was it bravado, an attempt to sound in control when everything else was spiraling? Or was it something more unsettling, knowledge of what police would or would not find? These are the questions that ripple through every discussion of this case. Understanding why RCMP used K9S first, before cadaver dogs, makes Daniel's comment even more provocative. Because the police decision was rooted in hope, but his statement sounded like certainty. Where the RCMP hesitated to assume death, Daniel seemed eager to dismiss it. That gap between cautious hope and unshakable confidence is where suspicion grows. In high-profile cases across North America, family members' statements are scrutinized for exactly this reason. Most parents, step-parents, or guardians cling to hope, even irrational hope, when cadaver dogs arrive. They beg for a miracle. They speak of prayers, of possibilities, of not giving up. To hear someone instead proclaim that nothing will be found sets off alarms, not only for investigators, but for the public listening. The sequence of events tells a story. RCMP began with K9 trackers because they believed in life. They escalated to cadaver dogs only when evidence failed to surface. And into that fragile transition, Daniel inserted his voice, a voice not of hope, but of certainty. His words now echo as the investigation deepens, raising questions that have yet to be answered. When investigators brought cadaver dogs into the Sullivan case, the entire community understood the gravity of that decision. It was no longer a rescue. It was a search for remains. Families prayed, neighbors whispered, and reporters emphasized the shift in tone. This was the moment where hope began to wither. And it was in this fragile, devastating stage that Daniel Martell stepped in front of cameras and declared, with unshakable confidence, 100% they will find nothing. At first, the words may sound like hope. A stepfather refusing to believe the worst, clinging desperately to the possibility that Lilly and Jack were alive. But the more closely you listen, the more unsettling the statement becomes. Most family members in similar cases plead, please let them still be alive. They pray, I hope the dogs don't find anything. They balance between fear and hope, speaking in terms of possibility, not certainty. Daniel did not. He didn't say, I hope. He didn't say maybe. He said, I know. That certainty is what sparked suspicion. How could he be so sure? For the RCMP, this kind of statement is not just television soundbite. It's evidence. Investigators pay close attention to the language of family members. Overconfidence, absolute declarations, and repeated insistence often raise red flags. Because unless someone has knowledge the public does not, no one can be 100% certain. Cadaver dogs are not perfect, but their track record is strong. Their ability to detect even microscopic traces of human remains is well documented. For a man with no training, no badge, no scientific data in front of him, to dismiss them so completely feels unnatural. There are several ways to interpret Daniel's words, and none of them are comfortable. One possibility is denial. Under crushing stress, some people cling to absolute statements as a way to keep their sanity. Saying 100% is a shield, a wall built against unbearable fear. If he admitted there was even a chance the dogs could succeed, he would also be admitting there was a chance his stepchildren were dead. Perhaps his words were the language of desperation, not confidence. Another possibility is performance. In front of cameras, some people feel the need to project strength. Maybe Daniel thought that if he appeared calm and assured, the public would believe in his innocence, in his role as a protective stepfather. In that reading, his statement was not about truth, but about optics. Yet even if that was the case, it backfired. Viewers watching at home did not see a grieving man. They saw a man too certain, too composed, too dismissive of one of the most powerful investigative tools available. And then there is the third possibility, the one that gnaws at the public imagination: knowledge. If Daniel knew, beyond doubt, that the cadaver dogs would fail, what did he know? Was it something about the location? Something about the timeline? Something about the fate of Lilly and Jack that had not yet been revealed? This interpretation is the darkest, and it is why suspicion continues to swirl. Communities, especially in small towns, are sensitive to language. In Nova Scotia, where neighbors know each other by name and word spreads quickly, Daniel's declaration spread like wildfire. Some defended him, saying he was simply holding on to hope. Others whispered that his confidence was unnatural, that he spoke not like a grieving parent, but like someone with insider knowledge. Social media lit up with debates, dissecting his tone, his body language, even the way he folded his arms. Forensic psychologists often study such statements in high-profile cases. The difference between "I hope" and "I know" can be enormous. One reflects fear, the other reflects certainty. Certainty, without evidence, is suspicious. And in cases involving missing children, suspicion is often the only lead investigators have. The RCMP have not confirmed whether Daniel's words shifted their focus, but history shows that law enforcement never ignores such moments. When a family member speaks in absolutes, investigators take note. They compare statements against timelines, alibis, and evidence. They look for inconsistencies. They wonder, was this a slip, or was it a clue? Public memory is long in cases like this. Once suspicion takes root, it rarely disappears. Even if Daniel meant nothing by his words, they will follow him. Every time the case is mentioned, people will recall that declaration 100%. They will find nothing. It has become part of the narrative, as memorable as the children's last sighting, as enduring as the search itself. But the deeper tragedy is this: his words overshadow the central focus. 2 children are still missing. While the community debates Daniel's intent, while social media dissects his language, the real mystery remains unsolved. Lilly and Jack have not been found. Their fate is unknown, and cadaver dogs, for all their accuracy, for all their power, have not yet delivered the answers. That tension is what keeps this case alive in the headlines. It is not just the mystery of two missing children. It is the collision of hope, suspicion, and science. It is the gap between what police search dogs can do and what one man insisted they could not. It is the uneasy question hanging in the air. Was Daniel simply defiant, or did he know more than he should? For the families watching, for the communities waiting, the answer to that question could change everything. Until then, Daniel's words remain suspended in time, echoing louder with each passing day of silence. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan has shaken Nova Scotia and drawn national attention. The difference between K9 trackers and cadaver dogs is more than technical. It's the line between hope and despair. And when Daniel Martell declared with absolute certainty that cadaver dogs would find nothing, suspicion ignited like wildfire. Was it denial, performance, or knowledge? These questions remain unanswered, and every day that passes makes them heavier. In our next investigation, we'll dive deeper into the missed warnings, the overlooked evidence, and the cracks in the case that may hold the truth. Don't miss it. Subscribe to True Child Cases for updates on Canada's most haunting mysteries.